Alright, on this video we're going to talk about setting up your importer. And there is a lot of different ways you can do this. It almost as every brand is a little bit different, but we're going to talk about some of the concepts first. Having an importer ready to go can save you days or weeks in your time, and time is our critical factor here. So we're going off of your importer on your RapidFire site. If you don't have a RapidFire site, the core back end of the sites are all the same, so you're going to always find it in the same spot, which is up here under structure and then down to feed importers. So I'm going to go ahead and as you understand, all of these are shortcuts, right? So I'm just going to go ahead and go into feed importers, and we're going to see what we have here. So right now we have one test importer. Now let's take a look at this importer, and I'm going to show you how to clone this over. So if you have a different brand and they're always going to have you know, the same headers, then I recommend you clone over the fields, and we'll talk about that in a second. But we're going to see what's inside this one. And so here's your basic settings. You don't have to change any of this. Your fetcher, if you're creating a brand new one, if you hit change, it's asking you, well, what kind of upload? Well, we're 99.9% of the time you're doing a file upload, so make sure that that's selected there. And you don't have to do this if you've done a core importer. This saves time, and then you can just clone that over. Then you don't have to change any of your settings. Then your parser. The parser's asking you, what are we doing? Well, you're using a CSV. It's comma delimited. Make sure that it's selected on that. It will change what your drop downs are, what you can do on that depending on what you select here. You don't have to change any of the settings here. Then your processor itself, what are we processing? So your importer is being used primarily to import data, but it's not just for data. You can import terms and pages. Drupal calls their pages nodes, so you can import products or coupons or customer information, or blogs or anything. But for these videos we're importing commerce products, so we have to make sure that's selected here. And this is the only one where you're going to go into the settings and the mapping. So your settings here are a couple different things, right? So it is a product, and by default this is the only thing. If it's set correctly on the parser, this is the only drop down you're going to have is product, and it's going to ask you what you want to do. Are we inserting new commerce products, or are we updating commerce products, right? We could insert and update, right? We could say insert new products and click this to say update existing. So this is maybe when you are bringing a brand on and they're giving you the whole file again, and so there's a couple new parts, but there's also some pricing changes, and so you want to make sure that you have all of it. You just have to make sure that what mapping fields you used on the first one are also on this next one, right? And so for this, we're not updating existing product because it doesn't exist yet. This little skip hash check and the full text format down here, if you are updating products, then you want to skip hash checks to force that to change if you wanted to, even if the information didn't change. If you just want to do make sure it's replacing everything, then you're good to go. Again, it's going to just verify that it's a product. You don't have to worry about the author or the tax rate. So we're going to go ahead and just hit save on that. Anything you do here, if you don't hit save at the bottom, it does not get done. And so do check that. And so here's where all the magic happens. Now what I did on this one, and we can do that on yours, is I created the base importer, which are all the required pieces of information, right? You must have a SKU, you must have a title, description, shipping weights, price, and image. But what I also did was pre-tamper these, because again, it might only take 5 minutes to create an importer, but that's 5 minutes we don't need to do if we know that all of them are going to come over with at least the basic information on it. So on this one, when you see this and you see this little tamper over here, let me show you what that means. So this is saying to the site to do certain things to certain fields. And SKU, you don't have to do anything to. Title, you shouldn't have to do anything to. Description, you shouldn't have to have a plugin. I made a plugin to Explode. I'm going to hit edit and show you this. So we're exploding this and we're separating that with a pipe. So when you have multiple values, and sometimes a manufacturer has multiple box dimensions, and so you want those in there, and you can put those in there, and that'll allow the site to properly quote out shipping. If there's 4 or 5 boxes, it'll give them all unique weights and dimensions. You can also limit this. Why would you limit that? Well, maybe you're importing images and they have 23 and you only want 7, so you can limit how many of those get done. We're not going to limit on any of this. So exploding means we are, and I'm going to explode this and show you. So if it didn't have a field that we already did, you add plugin down here. So this would come into play if you had a field for drive, and maybe some of them had 2-wheel drive or 4-wheel drive, or had multiple values that it fit, and you want to explode that. And so it's asking you, what do you want to do, right? So there's all kinds of different things you can do in here, and we're going to go explode, and then it changes it down, and we're going to use the separator as a pipe. The pipe, if you hit your shift button and then right above your enter key, there is a long pipe like you see there, along one straight line up and down. That's called a pipe, and that is used to separate multiple values. Now a lot of times on data sheets you might get something that they use semicolons to separate their multiple values. You can use the semicolon, you can tell it to use a semicolon. The reason I change those to pipes is that sometimes there's a semicolon within a piece of information that is not a separation of multiple values, and so you could end up with, you know, multiple pieces of information it thought you wanted to separate out. So I just change them to a pipe. And it's easy if you had something you know, on a data sheet that had a bunch of them. So like this one, let's pretend this was the pipe or the semicolon. If you highlight that cell and you hit your home and you hit replace, and you said, so they have those as space, and you said replace these with nothing, just the space, then it will take it, and it will take it just out of that column you highlighted. If you're doing something for the whole data sheet, you'd want to click this, and that will do it across the board on the whole data sheet. But you want to find and replace. Make sure that you save your data sheet after making any changes to it. But that's what this is all about. Now I'm not going to do this because, you know, this is the title and we're not ever going to have duplicate, you know, multiple titles. But if you've already created this, the pricing information, the image, this is incredibly important on the mathematical operation that you have done this correctly. So I'm going to go back up here and show you any kind of pricing field requires a mathematical operation. Why? Because Drupal reads it in pennies. So we have to tell it that this price is not in pennies. So you select mathematical operation and it will create this field name for you. Do not touch that. And we're going to go down here because we're timesing, right? We're going to use the times 100. And then we're just going to hit add. And that's going to tell it to take those pennies and turn them into the proper one. So anyway, so that's your tamper. And tampering is really critical. If you tamper incorrectly or you don't tamper and you do have multiple fields, you're going to screw up your import. So let's say that you're working with something with multiple categories. Sometimes a brand will send you a sheet and it's got multiple categories in it. If you don't separate those, you're going to create on your import something that as a category that says bumper / this / that. You're going to create new terms, and those then have to have some work done to clean them up. It is not hard to import, just like it's not hard to throw mud or ink in a pool, but getting that out isn't as easy as it was to get it in. So do take your time on this. And so then we're going to go back over here and we're going to go back to the mapping. So you need the header, right? The source is the header. And what I mean by that are these are headers, right? So this must match up to what you're importing. Now on this particular one we have SKU. Now you can either take SKU and put make this turn into SKU, or if you wanted to create a new importer because you're going to use this same sheet they sent you over and over, then we can take, I'm going to undo that, we can take what they have given you, right, and put it in here. But you really do want to copy and paste. A couple things are going to happen when you're copying and pasting. You're going to get exactly how they typed that in. So if you just typed in part number without it being all in caps on this, and then you try and import, it's going to say there were no SKUs found, because it reads it exactly. So it must be exact. All spaces must be exact. And this is also a good time to see if they've done this, if they've added a space after it. We want to just get rid of those spaces just to be on the safe side. And I have a video on trimming those up, right? It's dangerous when that's in there because you can't really see a space at the end, and so you might spend time importing only to go, why is this not happening? And all right, so anyway, so whatever goes in here must be identical to what's on your import sheet. Again, capitalization, spaces, all of that critical. And then you select where that's being mapped to. So it really doesn't matter. It could say part number, it could say cat. It doesn't matter what it says. It just matters that you are mapping it to the right area. So what you see in here is all areas on your website that can be mapped to. And so if you don't have right, certain fields and you're trying to map to them, then we have to stop and we have to create those fields, because otherwise you can't map if it doesn't currently exist on the website. The only thing you can map to that doesn't currently exist on the website is fitment, because fitment is the information within the field, right? Or the category, because you're adding a new term. You can add that term through your import. You can add a brand through your import, because it's not. So if there's a new lumen or a new piece of information within that field, you don't have to make sure that's created, because that's a subcategory inside of what you're mapping to, if that makes any sense. All right, so so when you're doing that, you're going to look down here and go, what is this? This is a product SKU, right, or a product title, or some piece of information, right? And so that is what you'll need to do when you're importing. Any discrepancy in this at all, and you will map to the wrong piece of information. Again, there's pricing, there's currency codes, which by default it's going to assume it's USA, right? It's US dollar, so you're mapping to this. And when you're mapping to images, for example, you have a couple different things you can map to. The title of the image, the alt title of the image, but the image itself, the field itself, is always ends with the URI, right? So if you're doing install instructions, if you had a description for that, then that's fine. If you don't have a description for it, if you don't have a title for your image or an alt tag, you do not have to import those. Those will by default take that title from what the product title is. So you definitely want to import the URI under things like images or PDFs or things that are not content types, right? So you just find the information and map to it, and you're good to go on that. Now, once you have everything you need, then you want to make sure this is always unique. And if you are mapping to a taxonomy term, for example, let me show you this. I'm just going to type this in because it doesn't matter. This is a taxonomy term. So if you're mapping a brand or a category, actually let's remove that and let's do exactly that. Let's do category on this base one. Let's spell that correctly. And we're going to map to category because that is a requirement. And we're going to map to brand because that also is required if you're putting something in. So now you're going to see this that says search taxonomy terms. And so you definitely want to make sure that you hit auto create. All right. If you don't hit auto create, and then you must save this, then if you have a new brand and it doesn't exist already, or if you have a new term and it doesn't exist already, it's not, you just told it not to add that. So you might end up importing a new part type and it's not showing up on the front end because you told it ignore it if it doesn't already exist. All right. So anyway, so once you have this, then you can get ready to actually import. So you hit edit again and hit import, and it's going to ask you which one. Now this importers is probably going to get very long for you. Again, maybe you're going to do one that has certain brands that you're going to update all the time, and so you use their headers, but it's going to say, okay, which one are we importing off of, and we're going to import off that. Here by default it goes to UTF-8. You do not have to use UTF-8 if you don't know how to change a file to UTF-8. In most cases, the files you get over from the brands are going to be Windows 1251 or 1252. So you can just default this to Windows 1251 and choose your file. It's going to open up. It must be saved as a CSV, right? And so if you're getting a file, you've been working on it, and you can see up here that it's an XLS, we're going to save as, comma delimited, right? So you're going to say that it has to be. And you'll know if it isn't, because when you go to import it, it'll say this file's not correct, right? So you just pull your file and you hit import. It'll take a minute, it'll import, and then the next step is, after you're done, is to go and check your work. Always check your work, because there's always sometimes there's always going to be a file that you rush through and you're like, hey, my images didn't show up. So again, did you check the image URL was a physical image URL and not to a Dropbox, or that it's not saying it's a 404, that it couldn't find it? Because that happens a lot, right? Did you have spaces after something? I know it's not, this is not yay, It takes a second, but there's no magic on this, right? You have to put in what they've given you, and you have to put it in the proper place on your website. So some of the files that you get, I'm going to pull this one back up. So we have on this file 13,305 images or parts, and you're going to get files like this that have this all separated. This is not importable, right? So you can only import off of one tab, and so you might have to start your import with, I'm going to do this. Go ahead and again make sure that you have found, so this is LED headlight bulbs. So before you import that, you want to go to Structure, Taxonomy Manager, Category, right? And you want to see, do I already have that in here? Anything you see a plus to has children underneath it, but that's a really hard way to do that. So you can simply do search, and this tries to auto fill, and so no, there is nothing that says LED headlight bulb. So let's try and type in head, and we do have headlights, right? So if this is something you don't have already, then you can leave it there, or you can create it right now so that it is already in its parent term when you import, and we can go over that in another video. But you want to make sure that, again, if they're saying they have a side marker kit on this one, so do you have side marker kit? Do you have side marker at all? Do you have side marker? Yep, you have it, but there's a space, right? And so you just want to check, and using this will help you not have those multiple terms where you're like, hey, this is showing up here but not there. Well, usually that's an import issue, right? That's something that wasn't correct. Or maybe even sometimes you might go, hey, I have two terms that say air blow gun. I can assure you that you don't. That if you have two of them that show up here, one will be like this with it tucked nicely behind the N, and one will be with a space because it created two. And so then you're going to want to term merge those two terms, and we'll go over that in another video as well. So that is creating your importer video, and again, this is something you just kind of have to do a few times to get comfortable with it. But please do not do this while you are on hold or you are addressing customers. This is something you really need to take a minute to do, and this will save you time overall. Adding these products by hand one at a time is unacceptable. All right, I hope this helped.